The black market for human organs is a chilling reality. This illicit trade preys on the vulnerable and desperate. It generates billions of dollars annually. This shadowy industry operates outside the law. It thrives in the shadows, untouched by regulations. It's a world of clandestine deals and forced surgeries. The World Health Organization estimates that only 10% of global organ transplant needs are met each year. This staggering gap between supply and demand fuels the black market. Desperate patients facing lengthy wait lists turn to illicit means. This desperation makes them easy targets for exploitation. The organ trade is a global issue. It impacts every corner of the world. However, developing nations are hit hardest. These countries often lack strong legal frameworks and resources. This makes them vulnerable to organ trafficking networks. This isn't just about numbers, it's about human lives. It's about the exploitation of the poor and the vulnerable. It's about a system that profits from desperation. The demand for organs, particularly kidneys, far exceeds the legal supply. This is a global health crisis. Kidneys are the most sought-after organs. They are essential for filtering waste from the blood. Kidney failure is a life-threatening condition. It requires either dialysis or a transplant. The reasons for kidney failure are numerous. Diabetes and hypertension are major contributors. These conditions are on the rise globally. This, in turn, fuels the demand for kidneys. The shortage of available organs has dire consequences. Thousands die each year waiting for a transplant. This desperate need creates a breeding ground for the black market. The lack of accessible and affordable healthcare exacerbates this issue. It pushes vulnerable individuals into making unimaginable choices. Who are the victims of organ trafficking? They are the most vulnerable members of society. They are the impoverished, the refugees, the undocumented migrants. They are often lured by promises of a better life. Traffickers prey on their desperation. They offer quick money in exchange for an organ. The reality, however, is far from the promises made. Victims often receive a fraction of the promised payment. They are left with long-term health issues. They often lack access to proper post-operative care. Many victims are unaware of the long-term health consequences. They are not informed about the risks involved in the surgery. The psychological trauma can be equally devastating. Victims are often coerced or forced into selling their organs. Many feel shame and regret. They are left to deal with the physical and emotional scars. The organ trade thrives on the exploitation of the vulnerable. It is a cruel and inhumane business. Organ trafficking is a sophisticated operation. It involves a network of individuals. At the heart of this network are the brokers. They are the middlemen. Brokers connect desperate patients with potential donors. They arrange travel, accommodation, and medical procedures. They often operate across borders. They work in the shadows, evading law enforcement. Brokers are driven by profit. They exploit both donors and recipients. They charge exorbitant fees, often keeping the majority of the money. The involvement of medical professionals is particularly disturbing. Some doctors and nurses are complicit in this trade. They perform illegal transplants. They falsify medical records. They betray their oath to do no harm. Section 5. Global hotspots of exploitation. Organ trafficking is a global problem. However, certain regions are particularly affected. These hotspots are often characterized by poverty, conflict, and weak governance. The Middle East and North Africa are major centers for organ trafficking. Refugees fleeing conflict zones are particularly vulnerable. They are desperate for money and safety. South Asia is another region with high rates of organ trafficking. Poverty and lack of access to healthcare drive many to sell their organs. The growth of medical tourism has also fueled the organ trade. Patients from developed countries travel to developing nations for cheaper transplants. This creates a demand that the black market is all too eager to fill. Section 6. A global failure. The illegal organ trade persists due to a lack of effective regulation, enforcement, and public awareness. Governments around the world have failed to adequately address this issue. Corruption often hinders law enforcement efforts. Corrupt officials may turn a blind eye to the trade. They may even be complicit in protecting traffickers. The lack of public awareness is also a major obstacle. Many people are unaware of the scale and brutality of this trade. This lack of awareness makes it difficult to garner public support for action. The international community must work together to combat this crime. This requires a multi-pronged approach. It includes strengthening legal frameworks, improving law enforcement cooperation, and raising public awareness. Section 7. Real faces, real stories. Behind the statistics are real people, each with their own story of exploitation and suffering. Jonas, a refugee from Eritrea, was trafficked for his kidney in Cairo. He was promised $10,000, but received only $6,000. He was left with chronic pain and no access to proper medical care. In Kenya, young men are selling their kidneys for as little as $1,000. They are driven by poverty and a lack of opportunities. Many are unaware of the long-term health risks. These stories are not isolated incidents. They are a stark reminder of the human cost of this illicit trade. Section 8. Fighting back. Despite the challenges, there are individuals and organizations working tirelessly to combat organ trafficking. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, or UNODC, plays a leading role. The UNODC provides technical assistance to countries to strengthen their legal frameworks and law enforcement capacity. They also work to raise public awareness about the issue. Non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, are also on the front lines. They provide support to victims of trafficking. They advocate for stronger laws and policies. They work to educate the public about the dangers of the organ trade. Section 9. A call to action. The fight against organ trafficking requires a collective effort. Governments, international organizations, NGOs, and individuals must all play their part. We must demand stronger laws and better enforcement. We must support organizations working to combat this crime. We must educate ourselves and others about the issue. Silence is not an option. We must speak out against this injustice. We must demand justice for the victims. We must work together to create a world where everyone has the right to bodily integrity and where no one is exploited for their organs.